Morning. How's everybody doing? It's good to see you. How many from the Midwest here? Wow. Wow. My first time to this part of Wisconsin. I've been in the western part of the state, but I had a beautiful drive up last night from Madison. It's good to be here. Great venue. Scott, thanks for the introduction. It's always a great opportunity when I can come up and get out of the heat in Omaha and try to do that at least once a week and get to other parts of the region. But, as Scott mentioned, there's 61 national parks in the Midwest. I spent most of my career actually in the West, Yellowstone, Yosemite, in the western U.S., spent some good time in D.C. Every day out of Washington can be a good day, sometimes more than others. Spent a good stint in the South, in Mississippi and Tennessee and Alabama. So I've kind of covered the country. I've moved my wife 9 times in 21 years. So you never know how many moves is too many until you get to that move. I think we hit it. So we're going to hang out. We're going to hang out in Omaha a little bit. But I've been incredibly impressed by the Midwest. And for all of you and the majority of you that live in the Midwest, it's a really special part of the country. Scott alluded, the Midwest is full of incredible national park units. We've got some great lake shores, national lake shores up here in the Great Lakes, like Sleeping Bear, which is across Lake Michigan, Apostle Islands, which is in northern Wisconsin, Pictured Rocks in Michigan. We've got great riverways like the St. Croix National Scenic Riverway in western Wisconsin, some great memorials like the St. Louis Arch and Mount Rushmore, great national parks like Teddy Roosevelt, Voyageurs, Isle Royale, Badlands, and then a range of very incredible historic parks and sites that are really dedicated to telling America's story from the Revolution to the Civil War to civil rights. Very privileged to work with a team of several thousand employees and volunteers who have dedicated their careers to protecting some of the best places in this country. One of the best parts of this job is being able to interact with so many great partners. We've got some incredible congressional support in our 13 states. For the most part, very, very good relations at the local, state, and federal level. Incredible tribal partners, corporate partners, nonprofits, university partners, and so it's been very special to engage on so many levels with so many people about the national park system and what we're all trying to achieve. Of special appreciation for the membership of groups like Isaac Walton. First, you all care very deeply about conservation and sustainable recreation. You understand that can be a difficult balance to achieve sometimes, the decision making between conservation and use. Very, very challenging, and those decisions are not going to get any easier as we move forward, as you know. You understand that the power of us working collectively together is very important to helping elevate performance across a much wider spectrum within this country. I think it's clear just looking at your core mission, vision, and priorities outlined in your plan that as a group you are very aligned in many ways with the NPS mission and priorities, whether we're talking about reaching and teaching next gen, whether we're talking about conservation or recreation values. We have a lot of alignment and I think some great opportunities to work together moving forward. Core mission and purpose of the National Park Service: conserving natural historic resources, wildlife, providing for the enjoyment of the same in such a manner and by such means as will leave them unimpaired for the enjoyment of future generations. It's a complicated mission, multidimensional. I think one of the most noble in the world. Very, very important that we do everything we can to uphold all of those various different components, and that's going to take all of us working in concert with one another to do that. I look at the mission statement of Isaac Walton: to conserve, restore, promote the sustainable use and enjoyment of our natural resources, including soil, air, woods, water, wildlife. You've got vision centered on conservation becoming part of everyday life. Everyone enjoys sustainable outdoor recreation, healthy lands and waters. You've got goals that connect youth to conservation and outdoor recreation, goals that talk about conservation and habitat restoration. So just an incredible range of alignment and quite frankly intersections with the National Park Service mission. So I'm proud to be here with you and look forward to some great conversations moving forward about how we can work together. If you take the basic principle that people protect and keep what they value, then we as a nation have made a decision to set aside certain places that represent those values. And it's important for us to build on and support that basic principle. You can make an argument that if you look at it in aggregate, the national park system represents a full spectrum of opportunities to the citizens of this country. And we really all have a unique responsibility to not only protect these places, but the ideals behind them. Our system represents some of the very best America has to offer. It has truly become a model for countries around the globe in conservation, recreation, historic preservation, education. We're in every state and U.S. territory, 412 units visited by a record 307 million people last year alone. Our visitor spending generates an estimated $30 billion in positive annual economic impacts, and for every federal dollar invested in the Park Service budget returns anywhere from $4 to $10 to local economies. That's something that we're very proud of as well. Our success at a fundamental level is based on our ability to partner. Our commitment to civic engagement is based largely on the principle that in order to succeed, we can't do it alone. We've got to do it in concert with others. Partnering is fundamental to our mission. It's one of the most important institutional responsibilities we have as an organization. And the bottom line is we do not succeed without the support of the American public. Even if we disagree on policy, on regulation, on approach, that's okay. It's the way our system is built. It's important that we have the ability to have substantive conversations and really work together in areas that we can find alignment wherever possible, and then leverage our collective resources in similar direction to achieve those goals. 2016 is a big year for us. It's a centennial, it's a 100-year anniversary. It's something that as a Park Service employee I'm very proud of. It's something as an American, as a veteran I'm very proud of as well. I know all of you are. You can be very proud of your national park system. It's a time for us to celebrate, reflect on a lot of great things that have occurred in the last 100 years. It's also a time for us to kind of look at maybe some of the things that haven't gone so well and how we can build upon that and take lessons learned moving forward. I think there are a lot of successes to glean from the past century. I think the visionaries that created the national park system, the National Park Service in 1916 would be pretty proud of where we've come in many ways. I think they'd also be a little bit surprised. Probably a little surprised there's a couple billion more people on the face of the planet. A little surprised that there's a couple 100 million more people in this country. Maybe surprised at the proliferation of economic development in such a short amount of time. Surprised as many of us are at the exponential growth in technology. I mean, who thought we would be looking at drones flying around national parks? Even 10 years ago, quite frankly, let alone 100. Smartphones, emails. Surprised that our visitation in 1916 was 325,000. Our visitation in 2015 was 307 million. Pretty surprised, I'm sure. They probably ask how we could be spending so much money compared to what they had and still not have it all figured out yet. You know, but just as hard as it would be, as it was for them to sit and talk about and predict or try to predict what was going to happen in the next 100 years, it's equally hard for us to sit here and try to predict what the next 100 will look like. Very difficult, very challenging. Who knows what the conversation will look like at the 2116 Isaac Walton conference. Guess is that even though none of us have a crystal ball, they'll probably be talking about a lot of similar issues. Those issues may change in context and magnitude, but a lot of them will remain generally the same. Some will become exponentially more complex, but unquestionably they will all require us to manage and coordinate at levels never thought of before. And so we've really approached the centennial kind of as an organization with the recognition that while a lot of good has happened, we have a long way to go, and we need to make sure that we've got the right infrastructure in place, we're asking the right questions and taking the right actions in order to ensure we've got an excellent next 100. The service, we got to ensure the Park Service thrives in the upcoming century, and it hinges upon us being able to answer effectively kind of the following questions. How do we operate more strategically and flexibly in the upcoming century? That's a big one. How do we make sure we're not a rigid federal bureaucracy? We've got flexibility built into our decision making. We're not stuck in our old ways. How do we remain relevant and increase relevancy to a wide range of current and new audiences? as all of you know, many of which are disconnected from the outdoors or don't have the opportunities to experience the outdoors the way many of us have. How do we manage competing priorities effectively? If one thing about this job that I found is it's impossible on major issues, it is impossible to get 100% consensus on anything. However, you can do a lot working together to try to manage differing political and public expectations in a way that's collaborative, measurable, and strategic. That's a goal. How do we increase opportunities to achieve our mission, find balance in decision making, especially relating to decisions on conservation versus use or enjoyment, and making sure we're not compromising the integrity of our core mission, but we're still thinking in new and non-traditional ways. That's a big challenge. Probably most importantly, how do we do the basics really well? Being adaptable and open to doing new ways of business. We have a $12 billion deferred maintenance backlog in the U.S. National Park Service, $12 billion. It's great that we can attract 300 million people a year to parks, but not so great if our infrastructure is in such poor shape or doesn't meet expectations that none of them want to come back. Staffing and operating gaps across the system need to be addressed. It's great if a park has record visitation once again, but not so great if they can't provide the service levels needed or expected to ensure our resources and visitors are protected adequately. So a lot of those questions get to focusing globally and long-term and strategically at the same time, making sure that we're taking care of the fundamentals as well, and our basic operations, the assets that we have currently under our control and under our charge, making sure that we're taking care of them the way we need to. I get a lot of questions about how come we don't do it like the private sector more. What's the private sector got for it, going for it, that they can use as a measurement stick every year? Profit, right? So define success in private sector, usually who they hire, how they hire, where they hire, their supply chains, you name it, is based on the one thing. You may get a CEO or somebody that argues that that's not the one thing, but generally speaking, they're in business for a reason, plain and simple. At the end of the quarter, at the end of the year, they make changes based on the one thing, plain and simple. Define success in conservation. Was the National Park Service successful in conservation last year? Was the National Park Service successful in recreation last year? I'd say yeah, but I don't know. I don't have the one thing to point to necessarily. I mean, I think collectively our efforts are working. We've got a long way to go, but it's hard to define success in some of these areas, especially in a multidimensional mission like the National Park System has. So it's not as easy as just doing it like the private sector. Although we do take lessons learned wherever we can. I think we're in a much better place than we have been in the past. Our business practices are more sound and things like that. We're still trying to figure out how to do better at measuring success. So it's important that we focus efforts with a solid mix of global thinking, whether that be in terms of how we stay relevant or how we develop large landscape conservation strategy, how we focus well on doing the basics with our systems, our financial platforms, our operational platforms. Moving into the centennial, our director, John Jarvis, issued an agency-wide call to action, or C2A. It's a strategic document that really helped provide a roadmap for the agency as we approach the centennial. Highlights a wide range of goals and objectives and actions to be implemented across the country. Priorities that transcend conservation, education, historic preservation, operations, professional excellence, while at the same time putting a very heavy focus and emphasis on the next generation and building relevancy. Probably the development of the call to action, which has served us very, very well, getting us to this point, and whose benefits will carry well beyond the centennial, couldn't have been done at a more challenging time. In 2010, 11, 12 especially, significant budget turbulence, as all of you know very well. A lot of unpredictability there. So it's very difficult sometimes to define what you can do when you're not exactly sure what you have from a financial resources standpoint. But the call to action has really worked very well for us. I'm going to hit a couple highlights, starting with the relevancy piece. The primary goal of our centennial is to create and connect with the next generation visitors, stewards, and advocates. Why that's a top priority is those are our next group of employees. Those are the next group of senators, the next group of philanthropic donors, the next group of supporters, you name it. And it's highly important. It's probably one of the reasons why you have that as one of your top goals as an organization, to connect with next generation. It's been shown, as you've probably seen as well, I don't see too many millennials in here, that millennials are less likely, no offense, I'm not one either, so I was safe saying that. It's been shown that millennials are less likely than previous generations to value time spent outdoors. And my son is 14, he's Gen Z. So he's gonna have a whole nother level of expectations. I think he already does. It's been shown that they'll have different expectations, they have different expectations, and they'll continue to grow dramatically in the upcoming century. So how do we evolve as an organization with those expectations? That's another good question. Over the past 100 years, the Park Service has focused very successfully on bringing people to parks. It's worked. You heard me say 325,000 visitors 100 years ago to over 300 million last year. So I'd say that's success, if that's a metric for gauging success and how many people come to parks. In that same time frame, 100 years, we've gone from about 50% of the American population base in this country living in and around urban centers to about 80%. So today, 80% of the US population lives in and around urban centers. And that change, that urbanization of the American population presents a lot of challenges and opportunities for us as an organization moving forward. Challenges from the standpoint that it can be harder and harder to connect with a growing urbanized population. All of you know urban growth spurs economic development, which is essential to the vitality of this country, but it does present some challenges, whether it's how we protect scenic view sheds, clean water, air quality, climate change, how higher visitation translates to higher levels of human impacts on our resources. So those are our challenges of an urbanized population and urban growth, economic growth. Those same challenges are opportunities. Opportunity to reach a much larger and diverse audience of supporters, much better opportunities for us to garner support for conservation at really an unprecedented level potentially. And we have better technology to reach next generation audiences and much more organized partner and advocacy groups to help us instill core conservation and recreation values in the next generation. Got a couple things we're doing specifically that I'll go over. Urban agenda. Our director, John Jarvis, several years ago realized that in order to tap into some of the urban centers where there are no national parks, we put a heavy emphasis on connecting urban America in those locations, putting NPS resources in centers that were traditionally void, placing a higher emphasis on education initiatives that bring parks to people, and use a variety of programs to bring inner city youth to parks, working with partners to do the same. Advancing our education mission. 100,000 students per year to our parks. You may have heard of every fourth grader to a park. I think there's been 2 million downloads of those passes nationally, which is just exceptional. Really trying to create the next generation of conservationists, scientists, educators, and stewards. We've really expanded our digital capacity and how we're using technology around the country, social media, better web presence, Wi-Fi in our parks in many areas. We've replaced thousands of exhibits, films, and other media. We've got a Healthy Parks, Healthy People initiative, which is really putting an emphasis on health connection with our parks, and a range of other areas to increase our relevancy. We manage some very important programs in the National Park Service, like the Land and Water Conservation Fund, the Rivers and Trails Conservation Assistance Program, Federal Historic Preservation Tax Credit Program, and all are administered by the NPS, and I think there's an incredible opportunity for us to focus these programs to continue contributing to the social, health, environmental, and economic goals of our urban communities while making our parks more and more relevant. Outside of the relevancy piece, within the call to action, we're looking at a goal that centers on preserving America's special places. It revolves around next century resource management, really promoting large landscape conservation, developing a better capacity to understand and respond to environmental changes. We're building our philanthropic and partnership capacity significantly The director created a number of major pushes to increase connections at all levels, created a group called the Congressional Friends of the Centennial Campaign, which has been highly successful, significantly improved our philanthropic capacity through actions of our National Park Foundation and many other key areas. And all of these collective efforts have really pushed our performance, connections, and partnerships to new levels and have generated enormous support across the country, both inside and outside the government. I do believe these collective efforts are, despite the turbulence I mentioned several years back, are one of the reasons that we got the largest federal appropriation in the history of the Park Service in 2016. We're putting that money to good use. So we also, on a kind of a more of an internal from an internal standpoint, are looking at how we do better professionally with our employees, with identifying leaders, with how our HR processes, how we recruit, how we retain, all those things that are absolutely essential to any organization in the public sector or the private sector. As I mentioned, it doesn't do us any good if we're doing great up here, but we're broken down below fundamentally. So it's an overall recognition that we can have the best mission in the world, but without a clear path, support, and well-trained, satisfied, and qualified workforce, we won't succeed. And so a lot of that's listening to our employees, our voice, and the voices of our partners. I'll give you a little example. Anyone know the Natchez Trace Parkway? Visited the Natchez Trace? So it's a 450-mile national parkway, one of the most historic corridors in the country. It starts in Nashville, Tennessee, and about 100 miles of it's in Tennessee, about 28 miles in the northwest corner of Alabama, and then it transcends the whole state of Mississippi. And I was a superintendent there. It's about 200 employees. It's a great place to be, great staff, 20 communities, 25 counties, 3 states. I could have a conversation with the mayor of Nashville at that time, was Carl Dean, and he recognized the value of that corridor, economically and otherwise. Did some great initiatives with him. But I could go talk to 19 other mayors and get different perspectives of what that parkway represented. To some, it was an economic development blockade. To some, it was just a commuter corridor. So it was a challenge getting the value of that corridor and really doing a good job as a federal manager within that corridor, listening to employees and partners. I thought I had it all figured out when I got there. So they mow enough grass. It's a national parkway. They mow enough grass to circumvent the globe at the equator 1.5 times every year. It's a gorgeous place. It's very undermarketed. It's a cool place to go if you ever get a chance. But they have these huge tractors, and these tractors drive up and down 6 months out of the year. That's all they do. And this gets to my listening skills, or my ineffective listening skills back then. We get there, and I have $250,000 of funding at the end of the year. And what are you going to do with it? Well, we've got these huge tractors. The tractors run $50,000 to $60,000 each. Why don't we buy some additional tractors? Our tractors are kind of outdated. Okay. So I won't say the names of the tractors, but there's 2 tractor options that we had available to us through contracting. And one was $50,000 per tractor. I'm talking about these big ones. And one was $62,000. So which one would you, as the American public, want me to purchase with your tax dollars? Okay, now someone said the cheaper one. You said the better tractor. Made in America. Made in America. Okay. So which one did I do? I picked the cheaper one, right? I got 6 for the price of 5 of the others, so I picked the cheaper one. And thought, wow, I'm great. And about 6 months later, I'm driving up the parkway. I'm going to a meeting or something. And I see one of the maintenance crews alongside the road. They're sitting in the grass, and they're eating lunch. And I get out, and I said, hey, they're taking a break. How you doing? Good, Soup. How are you? Well, pretty good. How's the new tractor working out? And I'm thinking they're going to say, phenomenal. And they're like, well, you want to drive it? And I said, yeah, sure, I'll drive it. And so these are just the monstrous tractors. I get in, and he gets in the cab with me. He's kind of hunched over, so I want to make sure I didn't crash it, which was very possible. And so we start driving the tractor down the side of the parkway, and we get down 500 feet or so, and then he goes, "You want to reverse up?" I said, "Sure." So we stop, put it in reverse, and he says, "All right, let's get ready." And I turn around like this, and we start going backwards. And he goes, "You feel that?" And I said, "Do I feel what?" He goes, "You feel your lower back." And I said, "Yeah, I mean, I feel the torque." He goes, "Can you imagine doing that for 6 months out of the year? Reversing probably 100 times a day? What kind of impact that has on your back?" And I said, "Wow, yeah, I didn't really think about that." He goes, "We've been telling management that for years, and you guys continue to buy us these tractors." The other tractor, which was a John Deere, was more expensive for a variety of reasons, but to them, the seat swiveled. This other tractor, the seat was locked, all right? And it's a metaphor for something much bigger. But the reality is that swivel seat was the most important thing to that employee. He didn't care about anything else. He didn't care what my name was, quite frankly. I mean, he wanted to go out and do his job and be given the right equipment, and he wanted to be listened to, and he wanted the right decisions to come out of what he was voicing. And so from that point forward, guess what we bought? But it was a hard lesson. But I always tell people, my employees, partners, is find the swivel seat. The swivel seat is absolutely essential that we find and that we communicate it and that we're taking actions off of the right things that are the most meaningful. And they may be not the huge thing. It may not be conservation at large. It may be something really small, but some of the small things can have some of the biggest impacts. Bottom line is we need, as managers within this organization, in order for us to manage your National Park Service effectively, need to have the best qualified workforce possible, and we're going to work towards that. We're going to do a lot better job. Like I said, a lot of work to do. We're going to work to understand and respond to what I call eliminating the lag factor of federal bureaucracy. We're working through this now. I think we're doing better, but we regularly lag in the actions that we take as a federal bureau because of our budget cycles are out of sync with our priorities, the complexities and cumbersome nature of our policies, politics, any number of things that sometimes prohibit us from responding effectively as an organization. And it's really up to us to eliminate those barriers and create that flexibility. You've heard me say that several times. It's a common theme wherever we can. We're going to increase our civic engagement and partnerships. Like I said, that's core to our mission. We do this all at varying levels of success. But as I've said 3 or 4 times now, we're going to rely more and more on partnerships in the upcoming century. You are the key to our success on many fronts. And so we're focused heavily on engaging current and new partners and instilling engagement as a core focus of performance with our leaders and managers. I find irony many times in how difficult we make it for partners to navigate our organizations. In some cases, we make it so difficult, I'm surprised that they even want to partner with us. We have an obligation to understand the barriers to partnerships and break them down wherever possible. So in closing, I'd say we're in a pivotal moment, and there's a sense of urgency and conviction that action is required if we are to succeed and sustain in the next century. And that century is definitely going to be different from the last. It's going to require constant reevaluation of both what we do and how we do it. The challenges that we face as a nation require us to be informed, engaged, and open-minded, recognize how important it is for us to assist and support one another, recognize that the entire parks family, national, state, county, city, can work together with partners more closely to provide seamless services to the public, generate higher and higher levels of support, and expand relevance to the American people. There are many things that divide us as a nation: socioeconomic status, political leanings, ethnicity, income, but the idea behind our parks can continue to unite Americans and increase the sense of pride and patriotism within our country. And not only is that a collective responsibility and privilege, but a significant honor that we should all embrace. Our success in the next century depends on it. Our collective ability to achieve this higher calling truly depends on each one of us. I appreciate your support. Look forward to working closely on many of these challenges moving forward. Thank you.